Jazzcast Pros.
Hello and welcome back to High Vibe Table Talks. If you are going to build your brand around something, don't forget that. You know, we're in a very politically charged climate currently, and whether you're saying something or not saying something, that is impacting your business. And today we are continuing with the series around big companies that failed and what us as entrepreneurs can learn from them. Target's first downfall happened when they tried to expand into Canada. Their second downfall has been recently. Since Target has rolled back their major DEI initiatives in January of 2025, their stock has dropped about $27 per share, raising about $12.4 billion in their market capitalization by the end of February 2025. Today, we're going to go over the history of their launch into Canada and what lessons you can learn as an entrepreneur to not do when you're expanding into new markets. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. After spending a decade working in sales for a startup and talking with hundreds of other women entrepreneurs, I know it can be lonely, but you can do this. We are having impactful conversations with people walking similar paths to you, so pull up a seat. This is High Vibe Table Talks. I've had a little bit of a friction of how to do this episode because, Target, they rolled back their DEI mission as a corporate company, and there was a big outcry to stop shopping there and not give them any more of our money because, DEI is something that is still so needed and such an important value of mine. And the fact that they buckled under the current administration to say that it's not something that they value anymore was something that said, okay, well, then you don't get any more of my money. And so as a society, it has really worked. So every time you're like, my dollar doesn't make an impact, as a collective, it really does. And so it took us all saying, we don't want to give this company our dollars anymore. And it really has hurt the people who are going to make that impact. I'm not trying to hurt the person stocking shelves there or checking me out, but the only way that the higher ups who are making those decisions can feel that impact is if we stop spending our dollar there. This case study isn't about the DEI. It's actually about Target's expansion into Canada and why that was such a failure. Kind of saying all this from an experience of someone who did really enjoy Target for the past 15 years. It is a place that I would frequent, but I just have to put in the caveat that I have not spent any of my money at Target since they rolled back those DEI initiatives. That is something that is important to me. If you find it important to you, then make sure that you are putting your dollar in with companies that do care about the same initiatives that you care about, like Costco. I do a lot more shopping at Costco and also like a lot more mom and pop shops. So I try to shop a lot more local. Nobody is perfect. And so even if you can reduce your spending there by half, or, I say the same thing as I'm a vegetarian and people are like, oh, I could never, but can you do 3 meatless meals a week? Can you do 1 meatless meal a week? That's going to make an impact on big agriculture if we do it all together. So without further ado, I had to add that caveat in there, but today's episode is going to be the downfall of Target's expansion into Canada. During 2020, I was just looking for other people to connect with, other business owners, and I joined this co-working space called Make Lemonade. And it was based in Toronto, and they had a virtual co-working membership that I participated in, and it was wonderful. I met so many incredible people. And I was on a call there and we were talking about Target, I think, or something came up about Target. And someone was like, oh yeah, they had a really failed expansion in Canada. And it was something that I had never heard of before. So she sent me an article and I was like, whoa, that is so interesting. Target, I feel like, is this staple in any community in the United States. You could be in California, you can be in Utah, you can be in North Carolina, and you're going to be able to experience Target, and you're going to be able to experience Target in the same way no matter where you are. Like, you know what to expect when you walk up to the front. You know what to expect in the different sections. You know what to expect out of cleanliness. You know what to expect out of how much product's on the shelves, about how much it's going to cost. It's a step up from certain places and a step down from other places. And so first we're going to talk about the history of Target, its expansion into other areas, its downfall, and then we're going to dive into, as an entrepreneur, what can you learn from it? It doesn't seem like, when you think about it in general terms, it doesn't seem like Target, which again is a very beloved US store, that jumping into Canada, it's not like a huge leap. So Target announced that it was going to be coming to Canada in 2011. People were so excited. Canadians had, there's actually, most people who live in Canada live in a very small part of it. There's a really interesting graphic that shows like all of Canada and where like 95% of the people live. And it's this like tiny little bubble around Toronto. And so they do come to the United States quite a bit. They spend a lot of time in Florida, a lot of time in New York. And so they have experienced Target. And if it's your first time stepping in there, it's a nice experience. Again, the customer experience it's very like bright. It's very kind of inclusive, or it used to be. And you know exactly what you're getting with that little red dot. In 2013, Target launched into Canada rapidly. They opened 133 stores in just over a year. There was a retail chain in Canada called Zellers, and so Target actually bought out the buildings and decided to just rebrand them all, expanding very fast. It kind of felt like this was an opportunity, because I'm sure they got a good deal on those buildings, and said, we have to take advantage of this. And so it sounds like, okay, if we can get Target right in these locations in the next year, we're going to be successful quickly. But that was not what happened. Target brought over a lot of US employees to then go and train the Canadian staff. But the software that they were using was very antiquated and not that user-friendly. And so while they tried to train them on it, it didn't transfer nearly as well as they thought it was. There is a different import and export cost in Canada. So the prices in Canada were much higher than the US prices that they were expecting. And so it felt like, you go to Target because you want like a level up maybe from Walmart, but you don't want to pay Macy's prices or an expensive retailer prices. And they weren't getting that for a multitude of reasons. Opening up in a new country, like, even though it can seem like, well, this is Canada and it's mostly, close to Toronto. And so there's a lot of experience. There's a lot of people who have shopped in Targets in the United States. And so their buying habits are going to be the same. Their expectations are the same. Their understanding of pricing is going to be the same. And so they assumed that like their reputation would carry them. So someone would walk into a Target because they had been to one previously and be like, oh, okay. And now, even though like maybe the prices were a little higher, or the shelves weren't as full because there was an issue with bringing in product, that their reputation would carry them through long enough to see the other side of it. And at the end of the day, it just was not. After opening those 133 stores, and you make a commitment that big, like no one's expecting you to be profitable right away. But according to the article that I read, Target CEO Brian Cornell decided to close the stores after determining that they would not become profitable until at least 2021. So 10 years of not being profitable. And if not being profitable means that like maybe you're losing $1,000 or $1,500 or and you can manage to bring in money other ways as like an entrepreneur. Like if my business isn't profitable by $1,000 in the first couple of years, but I have a full-time job, or I am able to do a side gig, go bartend or whatever, like that's not the end of the world. But for a multi-billion-dollar company, that is not acceptable. And especially as like again, I don't know how this transfers over to Canada, but we have publicly traded companies. And if your shareholders aren't making money quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter for a decade, they're not going to be very happy, and you're not going to be CEO very much longer. Another personal example is our grocery chain that started again in Rochester, New York. And maybe it'd be cool to do like a deep dive into what Wegmans does right, because it's another company that came from Rochester and has expanded all across the East Coast. And they could open a lot faster. They could open a lot more stores and be much bigger. But something that is important to them is that their top level C-suite of people goes and visits every store every single year. That customer experience, that customer feel, that interaction, that really understanding when consumers come into this store every single day, what are they seeing? What are they feeling? What is going on? And that is important to them. And so if they had 150 stores, I actually don't know how many they have, but their C-suite wouldn't be able to do it because there's only so many of them. And so they are very particular about where and how they open. They have a whole division of people that is just about finding the location, hiring the right people, making sure it happens in a way that is up to the Wegmans standard. And that has been very successful for them. I have a friend who moved to Chicago and loves Wegmans subs and cookie cake so much, and his mom went to go visit him this past weekend and brought him a sub and a cookie cake, and it just like made his whole weekend. Like the first thing, as soon as he flies home from Chicago to Rochester, is the first thing he does is go get a Wegmans sub. And like that's the impact that a brand can have, and that is important to Wegmans to keep that brand whenever you go there. But it's also funny because even within Rochester, like people are like, that's not my Wegmans. My Wegmans does it like this. And like people only go to their Wegmans. Like close to where I live, there's 2 Wegmans within maybe less than a mile of each other. But like I only go to this Wegmans because that's my Wegmans and it does these things well. And I don't like going to that Wegmans because I don't know where everything is. Like pretty much I can go to Wegmans, my Wegmans, and grocery shop blindfolded because I know where everything is and what I need. And the other one you get just a bit turned around. But they want people to feel so connected to that experience when they walk into a Wegmans that they don't want to shop anywhere else. Because even though maybe their prices are a little bit higher, having that Wegmans experience is worth it. I was listening to a podcast last week called Masters of Scale, and they had Simon Sinek on it, and it was so good. I would highly recommend listening to it. But he has his framework, The Power of Why, and I guess I haven't dove too much into it, but he has this thing called the golden circle. And people have asked him a lot, like, why haven't you trademarked it? Why haven't you like made that your brand? And he was like, because I would be spending too much time like running around chasing people who are trying to use it when they don't have the trademark, or people who like use the same thing but trademark it in something else. And like the semantics of it wasn't the most important. I just wanted people to understand it and implement it and bring it into their life. And he saw it as this like social movement. And in doing so, like when you do expand that fast, you are going to lose some of the control. You're going to lose some of the experience that people have with it. And so he understood that as a risk, like Wegmans doesn't want to lose that control. They don't want to lose that customer experience because that is at the heart of what is most important to them. That's in their top 3 priorities when they're expanding. And to Simon, that wasn't the point. That wasn't of utmost importance to make sure everyone follows the golden circle exactly right. He just wanted to get the idea of it into as many people and as many companies' heads and thought processes that he could. And so you're going to lose some of that quality and some of that control, just like PCs are okay with that. They want to be on as many people's desks as possible. Apple wants you to have a certain level of experience and have control over what your experience is when you are an Apple user. And so it's just more difficult to grow at scale. And I feel like Target tried to grow at scale while still maintaining and lost some of that quality, lost some of that control. And that really turned people off. When I walk into a Target, when I walk into a Wegmans, I expect certain things. I expect certain level, fullness of shelves and pricing and cleanliness and colors and all these certain things. And I don't expect the exact same level of some of those things when I walk into a Walmart. And I expect that when I go to a Macy's or a high level clothing boutique versus going to I don't really go shopping anymore for clothes unless it's like athletic clothes. But, I expect different things out of a Lululemon versus going to Walmart and picking up an exercise outfit. So what are some things that we can learn from this? And I think one of the big ones is what Simon Sinek was talking about, is when you are scaling, you're going to lose some of that control, some of that quality. And so really understanding how much of that is important to you. Your reputation isn't going to be everything. People aren't going to be like, oh, well, I had a really bad checkout experience, but it is Mershon, so it is what it is. You have to make sure that that customer experience is intact and that that's what people are going to receive when you're expanding quickly. One of the things that I think Target didn't understand is expanding into a market and really trying to take time to understand that audience and what's important to that audience. Let's say you sell to real estate agents and you want to expand into working with virtual assistants. You can't use the same customer experience that real estate agents want with virtual assistants. And so take some time and do your research into finding out what's important to them. What is a price point that works with them? What language do they use? What customer experience is important to them? How do they serve their customer? And so what do they want out of what you're offering? And how can you align those two things? So validate and honor those markets that you're entering and do your research, talk to people, listen, take people out for coffee and pick their brain, or, hire them, say, I would like to offer you $30 for an hour to understand you and what's important to your market, and make sure that you listen and really figure out how that aligns with your brand. Testing smaller markets. If Target had just opened a handful of stores and really understood what's important, what translates, what doesn't, what can happen effectively and efficiently, they probably could have been successful. But opening 133 stores in a year, that's a lot of variables that you have very little control over, and you can't make shifts quickly when you're opening at that type of speed. So, as I have said in every single episode, it's data over drama. And so make sure that you're listening to the data and go collect the data before you make these huge decisions like opening 133 stores. Again, I don't think anybody listening to this podcast has billions of dollars that they're going to invest in Canadian stores. But think about these things when maybe you want to open a new market. You want to offer this to a different segment of people. You want to expand an offer. Maybe you're currently selling to a certain demographic, certain segment of people, and you have this new idea. And the things that work for one may not work for the other. As you pivot, your brand, you may have really good brand clarity and really good customer service and customer experience. And certain real estate agents may share your name freely because of the work that you've done with them, but no one in the VA space knows who you are. And so lacking customer experience or not understanding that market could lead to people being really turned off and not enjoying their experience and sharing that with others. And so just think about that as you are pivoting into new markets. That is all I have for today. That has been really fun. I have 2 more of these segments that I'm doing around big businesses, how they failed, and what we can learn from them. Now that I was talking today, I may add in Wegmans as what can we learn from Wegmans, what they do really well, and how we can learn from that. But if there are any other companies where you're like, oh, this would be really interesting, I would love to hear that. And don't forget to join our virtual co-working that we have every Wednesday from noon to 2 EST. If you like this podcast, High Vibe Table Talks, don't forget to subscribe. We will see you next week. And remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.